In the early 1930s, Jinnah's adoption of such beliefs was yet to come. He was living in self-imposed exile in London. Prospering as a lawyer, he tried to enter Parliament, standing unsuccessfully as a candidate first for Labour, then for the Conservatives. Meanwhile, in the unlikely setting of suburban South London, a group of Indian students went even further than Iqbal, coming up with the revolutionary idea of a separate state for Muslims.
In Surbiton, London, we had a big dinner and we were thinking of these ideas, various ideas of how can we get freedom, how can we get freedom. And finally it emerged like this. We will have the Muslim state, and what is the name going to be? What name? So we said the first name of the provinces. We had P for Punjab, A for Afghania, K for Kashmir, S for Sindh, and Tan for Balochistan. And we had no idea at that time of East Pakistan joining us, you see. So this is how the word Pakistan was created.
The enthusiastic students took their new plan to Jinnah, now living in Hampstead with his sister Fatima and his daughter Dina.
And when we broached this subject to him, he was absolutely furious. And he said, almost he said, if I can remember quoting him, had it not been for your ages, I would have taken you to be stooges of British imperialism. You're out to break one good the British have done, to unite the heterogeneous elements of India into a united whole. And you're out to break this. Keep away, young men, keep away from there. Something like that.
So at that time, he was still absolutely committed to an Indian union.
Unity.
But in the 1930s, some Muslims in India were becoming worried by Congress. They believed Gandhi, now India's political superstar, was turning it into a Hindu-dominated organization, a charge Congress and its Muslim members fervently denied.
So I was deeply affected by what the Congress was doing, what Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was doing, what Mahatma Gandhi was doing. So it was a natural reaction on my side. And I joined the struggle in 1930 when I was a student of the Allahabad University.
Did you feel as a Muslim that Congress represented you as much as it did the Hindus?
Oh yes. I had no doubt in my mind. In fact, this seldom occurred to me. I thought the Congress was a nationalist organization comprising of all nationalities and of all communities. And I reacted spontaneously when the struggle started.
The Surbiton students were followed by a succession of Muslim leaders, pleading with Jinnah to return to India and revive the Muslim League. When Jinnah did go home to India, he still wanted to work as an ally of Congress against the British. His plans were wrecked by the elections of 1937. The Muslim League got a paltry 21% of the Muslim vote. Jinnah lost any muscle to force an accommodation with Congress.
It's the day he realized that, and he injected communalism in politics. Mr. Gandhi, I say. And Mr. Jinnah resented that. And he says, you are trying to Hinduize politics. He felt the Hindu being in perpetual majority, they will wipe out the Muslims. And Muslims will remain only serfs and will be totally dominated by the Hindu majority.
Under Congress rule, many Muslims would complain of discrimination and a rise in communal violence. The victorious Congress leader, Jawaharlal Nehru, insisted his party alone represented the Indian people and saw no reason to share power with Jinnah.
The charge is also laid against Nehru that if he had included the representatives, possibly the demand for partition wouldn't have arisen. Well, it is not easy to foresee events. Assuming we knew that this would result in the partition of the country, we could have taken a different line.
Nehru addressed a convention of Congress members, and he said that there are only two powers in the land, the British and the Congress. Then Quaid-e-Azam said, no, there was third party, and they're the Muslims.
Zia-ud-Din Suleri used to go to Muslim League meetings to hear Jinnah speak. He saw how Jinnah, defeated in the election and rejected by Nehru, now embarked on a new mass strategy to build up Muslim support. His rallying call became Islam in danger. Jinnah symbolically discarded his Savile Row suit and appeared in traditional Muslim dress. He advocated the two-nation theory and turned to exactly the kind of populist religious politics which had once caused him to fall out with Gandhi. At the 1938 Muslim League conference in Patna, Jinnah accused Congress of being only a Hindu body.
The speech that Mr. Jinnah made there was a bitter attack on the Congress. So bitter that Gandhi was obliged to make a reply. And I think, to my mind, that was the beginning. Patna was the beginning of the mass movement of the Muslim League.
Popular response was tremendous, there's no question about it, because you see, he gave the impression that here is the savior of Muslims from Hindu domination because of his brilliance, because of his cleverness, because of his incorruptible style of functioning. He was highly respected, there's no denying that.
The League was now turning into a mass movement of Indian Muslims, thanks to Jinnah's new line. It had a particular appeal for the young.
We went to the race course, and there we saw the stately-looking person. We were introduced, and when he heard that we were from part of Quetta, he said that I'd like you to come and have lunch with me tomorrow, and we can discuss more. Then he asked if there was a Muslim League in Quetta, which I said, no, there wasn't. So he says, well, that's something you've got to get about, forming a Muslim League in Baluchistan. And we went to lunch the next day, and a great deal was discussed, and a great deal was said how it should be opened and what should be done to form a Muslim League in Baluchistan.
Pyari Rashid's husband, Qazi Isa, became Jinnah's key man in Baluchistan and his host.
During that period, my father from Bhopal had sent a special cook to make luxurious dishes for him, but of course he wouldn't participate. And whenever you asked him what he'd like for a dessert, he always said, I'd like to have some baked custard. He was very fond of baked custard. He could have it twice a day at every meal, if it was possible for him to do so, I think.
When the Second World War broke out in Europe, London declared that India too was at war. But Congress was divided, and Nehru and Gandhi spent much of the war in prison. The British turned to the Muslim League for support and asked Jinnah what he wanted in return. Jinnah was uncertain. He asked his political secretary for some ideas.
He said, could you please give me a sort of brief for your own ideas on this? And I knew what the lines that the demand for Pakistan, or the idea of Pakistan, was following. And I prepared about, I think it was 2 or 3 pages of notes, mainly based on that file. And I gave it to him.
My father, and along with his advisors and members of the committee, spent hours with him, trying to persuade him to understand the benefit of Pakistan coming into being. And that was the arguments which went on for hours and hours at my home in Karachi.
So in other words, he was persuaded by events rather than taking the initiative?
Yes, he was forced by the events which took place. This is a real, straightforward truth.
Jinnah was being pushed towards a destination he'd never originally sought. In 1940, Muslims from all over India gathered in Lahore for a momentous session of the Muslim League. Jinnah took the train from Delhi.
I would call it a Pakistan special or something. With the entire leadership being carried in one train. In the center there was a compartment in which he, his sister, Mr. Jinnah, and myself. And the train pulled up. And the leaders, Muslim leaders who had come to receive him, they were pushed by the volunteers in the crowd. Nobody knew who was where. He stood at the door and he said, look, if you don't behave, I'm going to go back. And then he shouted, discipline. And the entire lot was absolutely silent. And I'm sure a number of those people did not even know what discipline meant. I mean, English word.
Jinnah addressed the crowd at Lahore's Minto Park for nearly 2 hours. But the future founder of Pakistan could only speak fluently in English.
My father was explaining to me what he was saying. And I did ask him, I said, he's speaking in English. And do the people understand? He said, they've trusted him, so they know what he's saying.
This old man was asked, do you know what he's saying? He's talking in English. He said, I don't know what he's saying, but I know for definite whatever he's saying is the right thing.
He was explaining at that time that the only answer is a separate homeland for the Muslims of India. We have tried all kinds of solutions with other communities and with the British, but unfortunately it has not come to anything. And we have come to this conclusion that now the final solution is that there should be 2 states, with the Muslim India and the Hindu India. And people understood.
The Lahore session passed a resolution demanding that areas in the northeast and northwest of India, where the Muslims were a majority, should become independent states. But the resolution was deliberately vague as to whether these states should be inside or outside of federal India.
It just partially advocated the concept of a separate Muslim state, but there were so many loopholes in it, and these loopholes indicated that there was still time if there could be any rapprochement between the Hindus and the Muslims.
While his followers believed he was talking about a separate Pakistan, for Jinnah it was more of a maximum demand. He was now called Qaid-e-Azam, the great leader. By employing the imagery and symbolism of Islam, he'd found he could fire the Muslim masses. But how orthodox a Muslim was he?
He was not a religious man, but he wasn't irreligious either. There was no big religious thing.
I asked Mr. Jinnah to say the prayers. He was a bit nervous about it because there were hundreds of thousands of people looking at him all the time. We tried to explain to him that prayer is much more important to the masses because they feel that if we are talking of a Muslim homeland, religion should come first. And that's how Mr. Jinnah accepted the position.
Some mullahs were suspicious of Jinnah's new commitment to Islam. They opposed the Pakistan idea because they feared it would be un-Islamic, and even issued fatwas against some League members.
They thought Pakistan, when it is established, it will be a secular state like Turkey. Because all those who are supporting this movement for Pakistan, their approach, according to them, was not really purely Islamic. It was the westernized version of Islam.
In other words, that Islam was safer within an undivided India than it was within a Muslim state.
Yes, exactly. This is what their impression was, and that's why they opposed the Pakistan movement.
Much of the movement's dynamism was coming from the Muslim University at Aligarh, birthplace of the two-nation theory, and now the center of Muslim League youth activity.
When I went to Aligarh, I think it was for the first time that I saw Mr. Jinnah. Tall, handsome, confident, bold. I was definitely attracted by his personality. He galvanized the Muslim masses. He awakened their consciousness and spirit, and a sense of destiny and identity. He declared that Aligarh especially was the arsenal of Muslim India.
And most of us, most of the students, not only from Aligarh but from other colleges and universities, Muslim students, were trained in special camps so that they could contact each and every voter for the battle that was to be fought.
The Pakistan idea was spreading into the markets and mosques of Muslim India. Some young enthusiasts distributed news sheets to convince the Muslims that they were being done down by the Hindus.
हम कोशिश कर रहे थे कि मुसलमानों को बताएं कि तुम्हारी जो इक्तिसादी हालत है और तुम्हारी तमाम तजारत हिंदुओं के हाथ में है, जो अंग्रेज़ के अपने आदमी है, और गरीब जो है गरीब से गरीबतर होते जा रहे हैं। ये जो देहात है, छोटे छोटे गांव में जो थे हिंदू, हमारे मुसलमानों को चीज़ें कर्ज पे देते थे, फिर जिस उनका फसल उठता था उस फसल में वो पैसा देते, फिर उस पर सूद भी लेते थे। चुनांचे बहुत सी ज़मीनें मुसलमानों का जो है हिंदुओं ने उस कर्ज के बदले में रख लिया था। तो यहाँ के लोगों को जो है हिंदुओं के इस अमल के खिलाफ बहुत नफरत थी, बहुत शिकायत।
In 1942, with the fall of Singapore and Rangoon, the war reached India's doorstep. The British government, desperate for India's help, sent Cabinet Minister Sir Stafford Cripps to win over Congress and the Muslim League.
And we hope that the Indian leaders will give the help they have already promised us as regards the mobilization of that great people in the protection of their own country.
In exchange for Jinnah's cooperation, Cripps conceded that any province could opt out of a future independent India. But Jinnah, now raising the stakes, rejected the offer on the grounds that Pakistan was not explicitly named. Jinnah was talking tough, but his purpose was still unclear. Did he want his Pakistan to stay within India or to become a new separate state? Meanwhile, Jinnah's daughter Dina had announced that she wanted to marry a non-Muslim. Though Jinnah himself had married a Parsi, the Qaid-e-Azam could not accept his own daughter behaving likewise.
He wasn't too happy because I think it was a crucial time all around.
And he would have preferred it in some ways if you'd married a Muslim?
Most probably, yes, absolutely.
Did it lead to any change in your relations with him?
Yes, it did. He was very disapproving, and we didn't speak for a few years.
The breach between father and daughter was only healed after a member of a rival Muslim party tried to murder Jinnah, having talked his way into the house in Bombay.
In 1943, it was in July, when an attempt was made on his life. That was about 1 o'clock or 1:15. I used to come at about 2, and I did come at 2 o'clock, and I learned that he has just escaped and doctors have bandaged, and he was resting in the bedroom. I went there.
He fought off the man. And what happened was that this man came with a knife. And my father was struggling with him, so the knife got him, and the chauffeur, his driver was in the driveway, ran, and he was a big Pathan, and he just got him off.
The first thing he again inquired from me is to ensure that the press statement has been released that the assassin was a Muslim. He says otherwise there could be riots. Then all of a sudden Dina came in and straight went to his bedroom. They were closeted for about 20 minutes or half an hour, and then she left. That's the first time that I saw her.
In September 1944, the house on Malabar Hill was the scene of lengthy negotiations between Jinnah and Gandhi, his old adversary, who had recently been released from detention. The Mahatma journeyed to Jinnah, still hoping to persuade him back into the all-India fold.
I think like two stalwarts doing a case, each recognized the merit of the other and was trying to find a weakness in the point of view of the other.
I think Gandhi realised that he was up against a sort of rock, as it were, who wasn't going to budge. And Jinnah realised he was up against a very clever fellow, which he was.
And both were a match for each other. Now, for example, the famous incident where in the very first day, Mr. Gandhi said, "You have mesmerized the Muslims." Mr. Jinnah retorted, "You have hypnotized the Hindus."
But the talks got nowhere. The two men stuck to their old positions. Gandhi refused to accept that India contained two nations, of Hindus and Muslims. Jinnah insisted on their separateness.
Mr. Jinnah claimed that he will only represent the Muslims. And Mr. Gandhi said he's representing whole of India. And Mr. Jinnah cornered him and says, "No, you cannot. You can at the most say that you are representing the Congress. And Congress in turn represents predominantly the Hindus."
That was another stumbling block in our way. Now, we couldn't say that Congress is a Hindu organization. It was impossible for us to say it because we were not a Hindu organization. Congress was a nationalist organization comprising of all nationalities and of all communities. If I participated in the struggle for freedom, it is as an Indian, not exactly as a Muslim.
The talks may have failed, but Jinnah's status was heightened simply by the Mahatma's public recognition of him. Jinnah's secretary, Sharifuddin Pirzada, was present throughout.
Mr. Jinnah's point was that he will make his best efforts to convince Mr. Gandhi about the possibility of establishment of Pakistan. At least he should accept the principle. Then the details can be worked out subsequently. So Mr. Jinnah was able to project Pakistan in this way. And these talks more or less received international notice.